That'll do. Start again. Good evening, members. Welcome to this Cabinet meeting, Monday, 4th of December 23. I shall start with the webcasting announcement. I would like to remind everyone present that this hybrid meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewings or other such use by third parties. Therefore, by participating in this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. If any public speakers or Microsoft Teams do not wish to have their images captured, they should ensure that their video settings throughout the meeting is turned off and set to audio only. Please be aware if technical difficulties interrupt the meeting that cannot be overcome, I may need to adjourn the meeting. Members are reminded to activate your microphones before speaking, including myself. Thank you. Item 2, apologies for the meeting, for absence.
I've received apologies from Councillors Sam Kane and Chris Whitbury.
Thank you. Any members' declarations of interests? No, thank you. Minutes of the last meeting, which is on page 5 to 9 with a supplementary agenda. Under item 57, there's an additional line being inserted. The report sets out the options considered, if any, and for the reason of recommendations and the decision. Are members happy with the minutes of the previous meeting? Thank you. Reports of portfolio holders. To receive oral reports from any portfolio holders. Thank you. None. Public questions and requests to address the Cabinet.
We don't have any, Chairman.
Thank you. Overview and scrutiny. I think that's over to Councillor Wixley.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I can give a brief report, if you wish, from our meeting which was held on the 21st November. It will be a brief report if you're happy for me to give it.
Carry on, please.
Right, well, we reviewed the draft place strategy document, which is going to go to Cabinet on the 18th of December, I believe. We also reviewed the Qualis quarter 4 budget monitoring report for 2023 and also the Qualis business plan. And Qualis was represented by the recently appointed Qualis Group's new chairman, Brian Johnson, as well as Andy House, the interim financial director, and Shasha Jeevans, who I think we've all met before, who is Group Managing Director and Executive Director. Our next meeting, as you're probably aware, will be Tuesday week, the 12th of December, which is a joint ONS and Cabinet meeting, but all members are invited to join, and that is to discuss the budget for 2024 to 25, and it won't be a public meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Phillip, I believe you have a question.
Just to say that Andy Howarth is actually the financial director of Qualis. He's no longer the interim. He did such a good job and has updated the reports we get so well, and he's fitted in. It's clear that he's a good candidate for that role, and he's been appointed as the financial director.
Do you have a name for the records?
Say the same as Councillor Wixley said in his report, Andy Howarth.
Brian Johnson? No.
Andy House.
Andy House. Thank you. On to the item 8, the risk management corporate risk register, which is on pages 10 to 46.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure all my colleagues have read through this in great detail. It was presented very effectively by Mr Small at the Audit and Governance meeting last Thursday. A number of questions did arise which were answered very well. A couple of things I'd like to highlight just in terms of what we see here. A couple of things that have reduced in severity, but the one that has gone up is actually delivering a balanced budget and sustainable medium-term financial plan. It shouldn't come as a surprise to any councillors that this is a risk at the moment. As Councillor Wixley already said, we do have a joint Cabinet and overview and scrutiny on the 12th of this month, when we'll be looking at some of the ways we have to address some of the gaps in the budget. And just to remind people, the gap in the budget is in excess of £3.5 million. for next year. We have to bring a balanced budget to Council in February, so that's a big gap that we have to work on. So it's completely correct that that should be raised as a risk. I do just want to pick up briefly, in case any residents have watched the audit and governance on YouTube. In terms of shared services, one of the key markers there, what we should be looking at is not time managing people, but actually results managing people. It's very clear if you've set clear objectives for what needs to be delivered out of a shared service. If those things are delivered, then it's working. If they're not delivered, then it's not working. So it comes down to a very simple approach. And I have great faith in our senior leadership team to make sure that in the shared services arena that we specify very exactly what it is that we're wanting out of there. And I do think it really has a potential to help us going forward in terms of not just our budget for the coming year, but the years after that. We do have a gap, as I said, in this budget, but we need to make sure that we address structural issues. Members will remember that I pointed out before that if we put 5% on salaries, we're looking at about £1.5 million. If we put 5% in council tax, we're looking at under £500,000. That means that 5% every year will make a gap greater than £1 million, and that will just keep growing. So we need to address that, and I think shared services gives us the opportunity to do that. Further on in the report, there's on page 13, there's the diagram of where the various risks lie, and on the subsequent pages, there's the detail on the risk register. I'm happy to take questions on it, and if they are too difficult, I'll pass them over to Mr. Small, because why not?
Thank you. Any members, any questions for Councillor Phillip? Councillor McCready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, and thank you for Councillor Phillips' comments there. We did actually speak about the climate change situation at overview and scrutiny. Just picking up from that, looking at page 11 on the risk assessment, SUS 001, which is called Climate Change. This really shocked me. Previously titled Failure to Achieve Carbon Emissions Targets. This really worried me. So, excuse me. It concerns me that it's still in the red category. I do note that it has been raised by 4 points, but it's still about the worst in the red category. And I would like more detail on this, please. And do we still expect to meet our target of net zero by 2030? I did raise this, as I said, a few weeks ago at overview and scrutiny. At that point, I was unaware that we were so badly into the red rag situation. Thank you.
Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Councillor McCready. I think there's a slight misunderstanding there of what the risk register is all about. The risk register is about weighting what the chances of the likelihood is compared to the impact of the risk that we're actually seeing. What we see in the risk register is further the rating after we have taken the current mitigation controls. We can see, and if we go to page 20 in the agenda, there's a lot more detail around SUS 001, which shows why we're seeing a direction of travel of it coming down. I think it's important to remember that what we're looking at here in this particular risk register item is the areas that we as a council can affect. We're not making a judgment on the overall climate change emergency position. This is what we as a council can achieve, and that's driven down by the mitigation that we have, and we will continue to work on that to mitigate the issues that we have as far as possible.
Councillor McCready, happy with that response?
Yes, thank you very much. That's very clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just need to keep raising.
Any further comments? Okay, thank you very much. Was there any recommendations to receive the I've moved the pages on?
Chairman, yes, there is. We were asked to approve the corporate risk register, considering whether there's any new or emerging risks that need to be added, and we approve the risk management policy and strategy. And to be honest, I haven't spent any time presenting the risk management policy and strategy. That starts on page 30 and is available for people to read. I'm hoping that everybody's read it, and since nobody has raised issues with it, people are comfortable.
Okay, members, are we happy to accept all three recommendations? Agreed. Thank you. Can you put the recommendations as well, because I haven't got a hard copy tonight. I haven't given one. Moving on to the next item, item 9, implementation of the local plan. There's 2 recommendations on there. I have thank you. The strategic master plans. Regarding strategic master plans, scheduled meetings and workshops will take place with site promoters and developers in accordance with the project's plans agreed with the planning performance agreements. Some key updates to highlight include Latin Priory Design Code has been subject to a public consultation and will be reviewed following the feedback with the intention of seeking endorsement for the final version in early 2020, that should say 2024, I think. The East of Harlow Master Planning Guidance Supplementary Planning Document consultation is concluded, and officers are working with Harlow Council officers on the review and updating of the document. It is anticipated this will be finalised for endorsement in early 2024. The public consultation on the draft North Weald Bassett Strategic Master Plan Framework has commenced and will run through to the 16th of January 2024. Therefore, feedback will be reviewed and the amendments to the master plan made as appropriate. The site promoters of the South Epping Master Plan are engaged with council officers on the development of a strategic master plan for the site. A fixed programme has not yet been agreed, but public consultation on the draft master plan is anticipated to take place in 2024. The annual infrastructure funding statement appended to the report is the annual infrastructure funding statement for the financial year 22-23, and this sets out the Section 106 agreements completed in that year, the types and the values of contributions included in the agreement and the monies paid to the council. The Section 106 funds are to be spent in accordance with the stipulations within each legal agreement and in relation to each specific planning application. The majority of the funds held, while not yet dispersed, are allocated for specific purposes which include Epping Forest SAC mitigation measures, affordable housing provision and primary health care, providing capacity enhancements to GP surgeries. In recognition of the allocation of some of the monies as a discretionary element, officers are currently developing a funding grant scheme to provide a transport process as how this will be managed. Transparent process. Thank you. Members, those are the 2 recommendations. The process of strategic master plan and concept framework, including the use of the planning performance agreements and the progress of proposals at pre-application and application stage be noted, and that the infrastructure funding statement for 22-23, see Appendix B, is agreed for online publication by the 31st of December 2023. Members, any questions? Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for that report. And I know a couple of the consultations have been ongoing, including the Harlow and Gilston Garden Town, which affects my own ward, covering Fulwood Common. Just in relation to, and this is a very hyper-local question, so not too strategic, but often when we see planning applications come to committee, it says they've consulted with Essex Highways, which may well be the case on things like safety, but what they often don't do is consult on things like the local highways panel and some of the detailed schemes that county councillors might have raised or be in the process of raising. I just wondered, particularly on these larger schemes, which are obviously going to have a huge impact on the community, what extra steps are we taking, as well as the developers, to ensure that we look at every avenue when it comes to highways and not just the basic safety, which seems to be what comes to planning committee? Thank you.
I don't think we've got anybody here to comment on that.
Chair,
Nick, sorry, Nick. Yeah.
Hi. Thanks for the question. I think the on these large schemes, Essex are heavily involved in the pre-application negotiations, and it does go. It's beyond pure highway safety, which I know is their primary role. So we are talking about the full public transport and cycle routes, etc. with Essex. I take the local highway panel, I take on board that is not always a feature of that process, and we can make sure that happens in future, so that the work going on in that area is reconciled with the master planning work.
Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know whether it would be appropriate within this report, but I don't know whether it's worth just putting a line on it's recommended that county councillors are consulted on master plan applications. It's just I know myself when schemes have come to committee, there's pieces that I've taken up that haven't been reflected in the county council's comments. Thank you.
Mr Finney.
Consult county councillors on the draft master plans. We can take that on board.
Okay, noted. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just noted on the Section 106 contributions. Am I right in thinking essentially the values index linked from the period the Section 106 agreement is signed to it being paid over? Obviously, once it's in our accounts, you know, it stops being an index link and presumably it gets whatever interest we get on it. I mean, given inflation and cost increase and so forth, that rather suggests that we want to sort of not delay, we don't want to receive it until we're ready to spend it, and once we have received it, we want to spend it as quickly as possible. And I just wondered, I mean, there's a very big balance we've got at the moment. I mean, how much of that is put against particular projects, and how quickly do we expect that money to be spent on the mitigation measures that the developments require?
Thank you. I don't know if Mr Finney wants to answer that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, you're correct. So they're index linked until the point they're paid, and then they are held by us. So there is an imperative to make sure they're spent as quickly as possible, given the inflation situation. There is always a lag in what they can be used for. The current balance is a large part of that relates to Epping Forest SAC mitigation monies, some of which will be passed to the Conservators of Epping Forest in the near future, but some of which is for air quality mitigation schemes, which will take a time to put in place. There is some of the funding is for affordable housing provision, which goes to the council's housing team, and that money is available for them to use immediately, and they do put that to use as and when their build programme allows that to be used. Another part of the funds is for primary health care, and there's been some changes in the health organisations, but the new ICB is now established, and we've recently met with them regarding making the payments. So it's in hand, and we recognise that it does need to be spent as quickly as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Whitehouse, thank you for that.
That was helpful, thanks. I look forward to seeing it go out the door.
I think we are actually spending some of the money already on the air quality monitoring. That's already in hand. And Councillor Wixley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Mr Finney has actually just touched briefly on the point which I'd like to ask about, and that is the mitigation measures regarding Epping Forest. I just wonder in practical terms what that money is going to be spent on, because it's not clear to me, and I've actually spoken to planning officer and he wasn't too clear either, so I think it would be interesting to know how that's going to work.
Mr Finney.
Apologies that I'm not very close to the detail of the mitigation strategy, but I know there's a range of measures being investigated. Some of the money is simply for the monitoring of what's happening, so that we've got our pulse on changes that are happening, and updated traffic surveys are undertaken, etc. but I'm not close to the detail, I'm afraid.
Chairman, I remember bringing the list of the mitigation strategy to Council so that we went through it. I suggest Councillor Wixie goes back to his Council minutes and sees the records in there of exactly what was assigned to it. I do believe that the Conservatives were looking to see whether they needed to develop that, but I haven't seen an update to it yet. I assume when that update does come, you will be bringing it back to Council for information.
Thank you. Buffer zones comes to mind with investing in buffer zones between the existing Epping Forest and the areas close to. Councillor Wixie, is that a legacy hand that you have up there or a supplementary question?
No, it is a legacy hand. I would just like to, Councillor Phillip has mentioned somewhere where I could perhaps investigate this further. I just wonder if you could clarify that for me, please.
Yes, the minutes of the Council meeting where I brought this to and the Council agreed to it. I can't remember which date it was. I suspect it was around 2016, would be my guess, because it would have been in place before we adopted, resolved to submit the local plan.
Okay, thanks very much for that.
Thank you. So recommendations from... want to go again?
No, I thought you were going to call me for a question. I did have one, and it's on page 55, where the Appendix A is showing dates for delivery due to commence. While I can see a 24 to 25 date being reasonable for Latin Priory, 25-26 with a PPA just signed for Water Lane does seem reasonably aggressive, but I might be, I'm surprised at that. When I see for the east of Harlow that a PPA is only going to be secured once developers have been engaged, seeing a delivery due to commence in 25-26 seems to me overly optimistic. Is there good justification for believing that the delivery will start to commence in that time, or is that a figure that's likely to be at risk?
Good question, but further on in the document, I think that someone has now been appointed, so hopefully things will move at a greater pace. And also discussions around the hospital are taking place for the east of Harlow, so that all moulds into one. So hopefully the developers, now they've come forward, we might see some movement, but it's still got to go to the QRP. Whereas when, as you mentioned, Water Lane and the others, some of them have already been to QRP. So, you know, or they're booked in for March, early next, well, one's March next year and one's September. So things are starting to move now. September was Northfield Bassett, so that's already been to QRP. So hopefully, east of Harlow, but we'll keep you informed if there's any further delays. Any further questions? Okay, thank you. With those two recommendations, are we happy to accept those? Agreed. Thank you. Item 10. I have to whiz through because I haven't got the hard copy. Is the award of the contract for off-street car parking. It's Councillor Sam Kane who's not present this evening. There are 3 recommendations on there. Has everybody had a chance to read the paperwork? Councillor Phillip.
Chairman, yes, if I might just briefly, I mean, the good news here is that we're allocating the budget from within the existing provision. It actually is a good contract from that point of view. You can see on page 88 that the price was nearly the same as APOCA, but it was significantly better on quality. And I do think even though we are under a significant budget pressure, it's really important that we actually remember that quality is really important for our car parks, and we need to keep there. We do have a yearly sum of just under 230,000, which is, and here is one of the places the risk does lie, is the yearly uplift of CPI, but that's not an unexpected condition in a contract like this. It just ties back into my comment earlier on that although we have suggestions of how we might address some of the gap in the budget, we do need to solve the underlying issue of making sure that we don't spend more than we bring in. But given where we are with this, I think it's a sensible thing for us to do. But I might be just tempted to add to recommendation to the yearly cost with its attendant CPI increase be budgeted.
Mr Warwick, have you any comments on that?
Yeah, no, I agree with Councillor Phillips' comments. So the other thing with the contract award recommendation is to Marston Holdings, who are our current contractor and have been for the last 7 years. So we're confident in what they can supply, and as part of the budgeting process, the CPI is factored in each year.
Thank you, Mr Warwick. So we have the 3 recommendations there. I have to add that on page 88, number 1, it is quite important at the moment because the existing contract does expire 31st of March 2024. We will need to get this ratified. With those the 3 recommendations with the slight amendment to recommendation 2, which I believe was to increase by annual CPI.
Simply to note that the contract comes with an annual CPI increase.
Okay, thank you. You've got that to note that. Those 3 recommendations, are we in agreement? Agreed? Thank you. Yeah, that's the next one, isn't it? I think it's there. There's only 2 pages on. Next item on the agenda is agenda item 11, and the recommendation is attached as Appendix 1. There's a draft calendar of council meetings for 24-25. Be recommended to the council for adoption. Any questions or any comments? I'd be pleased to note on the last page of that document that I know some members were not happy with the party conferences, but as with every year, we do include the dates of the party conferences, which is dates to avoid meetings. And if you are concerned about this, it is actually on page 96. Thank you very much. Members, are you happy to accept those dates? Agreed. Thank you. I think that's the last thing. Have we got any supplementaries? No? Okay, I close the meeting at 29 minutes past 7. Thank you, members.